Hello and welcome to our podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Baez. Today we have a very special guest with us, Marcos Giron, a software engineer who has successfully led the migration to AWS. Marcos is here to share his invaluable insights and experience with us. Thank you for joining us today, Marcos. We're excited to learn from your expertise on AWS.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm excited to be here and look forward to sharing my experiences with everyone.
Thanks, Marcos. So let's jump right in and start with our first question. What best practices would you recommend for a successful migration to AWS?
Okay, there are different points to share here. Let me start with the most obvious, doesn't matter the target framework, which is to understand the main logic of the applications you want to migrate and list the different patterns you may find in your code. Afterwards, you will be in position to make the decisions about what programming language to use and about other key items. Another good practice is to use infrastructure as a code tool. We use Terraform, for example, and also a CI/CD pipeline. We use GitLab CI/CD in our migration. They will help you a lot when you deploy your applications and AWS resources. Before going through the different AWS services and getting lost, it is key to understand what you need to make your applications run. Will they be heavy applications? Will they need to implement a guaranteed delivery pattern, for example? Giving a thought about these points will help you to make the correct choice about what AWS services to use. When you work with AWS components, please be careful with the naming component. If you manage it in a smart way, you will be able to work with different non-production environments. Remember, you must avoid having only one AWS account. You should have 2 accounts at least, for example, non-production and production. Finally, I would suggest you try to use the newest version of the different languages, tools, and AWS services you want to use. This will avoid security vulnerabilities and also a lot of work after the migration task has been completed.
Thank you. That's very interesting, Marcos. I was also wondering what common mistakes should companies avoid when migrating to AWS?
I think one common mistake might be not taking into account the AWS services pricing and not doing research about the amount of traffic your application might need to process and the requirements. Also, not having an AWS platform with a team to manage it is a huge mistake. If you don't have a strong and healthy platform, how would you be able to deploy your new applications and make them work? Finally, the different AWS users should be set up in advance. It is a common mistake that developers start programming, but they can't access to the desired AWS service.
Right, that's very interesting. Thank you, Marcos. So as per your experience, how would you address security during and after the migration?
A good practice is to avoid having credentials and passwords hard-coded in the code. Therefore, we store them in a security repository. Also, the different AWS account users should have the correct permissions. You may want to use roles for that purpose. In addition, I would add security scanners to spot vulnerabilities in your code, with it enabling the SAST and dependency scanning features that GitLab provides. Finally, if I were you, I would set up a VPC to launch AWS resources in a logically insulated virtual network.
That's great. Thank you so much for those tips. And also, what AWS security features would you recommend using to protect data and applications?
Okay, a Secret Manager to store and manage credentials, Amazon VPC, and AWS IAM to securely manage identities and access to AWS services and resources. You can define users, roles, and policies there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Marcos. Let's talk about trends now. What trends do you see in the future of cloud migration, specifically towards AWS?
From my humble point of view, we use AI tools more and more. So I believe the Amazon Q, which is the AWS AI-powered assistant, will become more populous and useful. Also, some businesses are keen on serverless solutions. So AWS Lambda functions together with the Amazon API gateway may be even more popular in the future. Finally, we have used a Kubernetes cluster to host and run our new solutions. We are quite happy with that service. So Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service will continue to be key in the future.
That's great. And finally, to finish this podcast, what advice could you give to companies that are actually considering migration but are still a bit unsure about it?
I would not be afraid to carry out this migration due to the following key points. The first one is cloud computing provides scalability and flexibility. It also allows developers to accelerate development with quick deployments. About pricing, AWS, you pay only for the individual services you need for as long as you use them. In fact, some services are free if you don't exceed a minimum. So this means cost saving. There are a huge amount of AWS services to meet your business needs. And finally, there is a lot of documentation and user guides about this framework.
Oh, Marcos, this actually has been a very informative conversation. Thank you so much. Your insights into migrating to AWS have been extremely valuable for us, and I'm sure our listeners have gained a lot from your experience as well. And thank you once again, Marcos, for joining us and sharing your knowledge. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, keep learning and keep innovating. Bye for now.